there's a tradition amongst Baha'is, began a very long time ago when Abdul Baha, a very revered, uh, the son of our prophet Baha'u'llah, that's the picture of him up there on those books. He came to America to give a series of talks, and we will be going over one of those actually later on tonight. And after he would have a talk at a church or somewhere, one of the believers would invite him back to his house, and everyone, the whole community would come in, and they would talk into the late hours of the night, just discussing various topics. And that became the tradition of the fireside. So Baha'is ever since have been inviting people into their homes to share food, and then usually there's a topic of discussion. There are several different ways to do firesides. I think you guys are familiar with the uh, more laid back way, where there's usually just like a theme and some things to be read. From my hometown, I was used to we'd have different Baha'is would come through town and would give a talk on a topic that they had been studying recently. So more TED Talk, more lecture style. But we will have a discussion later. I'm going to go over really tonight's topic is God and game theory, and which is kind of like the study of the way to be in this world, life strategies. Um, but when I'm finished, there'll just be a just general discussion around this. And honestly, it doesn't have to be on game theory. We can talk about just about anything. But this is one of my favorite topics because it's very interesting. All right, so where are we? Oof, there we go. So uh, we lose sight of the fact that we live in the most peaceful era that has ever existed in all of human history. We like to think back into the 20th century and think of the great world wars and all the lives that were lost in the world wars and how horrible that was. But the uncomfortable truth is that the majority of human life has been lost in small skirmishes amongst small groups of human beings over vast amounts of time. Okay, so like in the 150 to 200,000 years of anatomically modern Homo sapiens sapiens, most people have died in one of these. So, looking at the archaeological record, pre civilization, on average, 15 to 30% of prehistoric humans died violent deaths. Now that is inconceivable to us, because again, we live in one of the greatest eras in human history. So, if we look at prehistoric archaeological sites, for instance, South Dakota, in about 1300 common era, after the death of Christ. I hate this whole common era stuff. 60% of people died violent deaths. In Nubia, 46%. You'll notice that British Columbia makes the top 5 in 3 different of our societies, had deaths of 32%, 27%, and 23% of people died violent deaths. So when we dig up their graves, the archaeological sites, 30% of people will have damage to their forearms or something like that that demonstrates that they died violent deaths. Now, if we look at state societies, for instance, we now switch to a different metric. This is deaths per 100,000. So in Mexico, 251 people died per 100,000. And then Germany up from 1900 to 1990, 160. And then if you go all the way down to the US, 3.79. And then today, as of 2007, worldwide, 0.33 out of 100,000 people die violent deaths. So again, we've gone from an inconceivable amount of deaths, some places 60% of people, to, here, let me change, I'll do a little math for us. So if you do the math, 12.6% for that Meso-Mexican, and then down here for the world as of 2007, 0.02% of people die violent deaths. So miraculous.
That's not including war, it includes war.
That includes war. There's just so many of us. There's like 8 billion of us.
Yeah.
So civilization, despite its many flaws, has drastically reduced the murder rate. So the Baha'i perspective is that civilization emerges where divine inspiration, divine revelation is sown. So there is a way to be communicated to us by God, and that following that path creates a civilization that brings order and peace to the world. So we see it as the fruit of the Logos, which is the utterance of God made flesh. So your Buddhas, your Zoroasters, your Krishnas. So these teachings of these people created civilizations that drastically reduced the amount of violence in the world. But that's the Baha'i perspective. Is this true? How can we know? So this is a slide I use in a lot of my talks. The virtues of humanity are many, but science is the most noble of them all. The distinction which man enjoys above and beyond the station of the animal is due to this paramount virtue. It is a bestowal of God. It is not material, it is divine. Oop, come on. Science is an effulgence of the sun of reality, the power of investigating and discovering the verities of the universe, the means by which man finds a pathway to God. This is Abdul Baha again, that lovely man in that photo up there. So, play is the highest form of research. Where are we? Sorry, it's been a while since I've used this. All right, so game theory. Again, the study of strategy. So the earliest example of game theory thought comes from Plato. When in the Laches and Symposium, he discusses Socrates and his experience at the Battle of Delium. He thinks about Socrates showing courage, standing firm in retreat, embodying true courage. But then he thinks of, in this battle between the Athenians, who Socrates fought with, and the Boeotians, he recalls, Plato thinks of a soldier in the front line of the Boeotian line might reason, if we hold, I may still die. If we break, I will almost certainly die. Either way, my best chance seems to be running away. So the question he was thinking at is like, what happens if all soldiers have that line of reasoning? And it's like, doesn't matter if you're going to win or lose. The efforts of your people will crumble and you will fail. So this logic resembles a proto-game theory problem. The rational individual choice undermines the collective good. And so Socrates' example shows courage is resisting this logic, standing firm for duty, justice, and the common good. So like having principles that we can sacrifice for creates a greater good. And it's from that kind of reasoning that we escape the state of nature and rise above and create civilization. So, game theory. The study of mathematical models of conflict and cooperation between intelligent, rational decision makers, also known as the study of strategies. So this is Robert Axelrod, a professor of political science and the study of human understanding. In 1962, he was just doing his thing. The Cuban Missile Crisis happens, and the whole world comes this close, within a hair's breadth of absolute extinction. We now have the ability to destroy all life on this planet. And so he began thinking, like, how do we act in a world to have the most likely outcome of thriving and of surviving? So he got a bunch of scientists together in 1980. It took a while because even though he was dabbling with algorithms in the 60s, it wasn't until the 80s where he had enough people to get together to run this kind of thing. So his question was, what was the best strategy in life? So he collaborated with computer scientists across the globe, each computer scientist coming up with an algorithm, which is basically a set of decisions. Like if this happens, then this happens. If this happens, then this happens. And then he had them compete with each other in a game of round robin of this thing called the prisoner's dilemma. So each algorithm would compete 200 times with each algorithm in this prisoner's dilemma. So to explain it, two prisoners who have never met, but they just collaborated in a crime, but they are captured and put into separate rooms. It's the key being is that they're essentially strangers to each other, even though they cooperated in this crime. So they are recent acquaintances. They're interrogated for the same crime. They're isolated from each other, and each is offered the same deal. You can rat on the other for a reduced sentence, and here's the prisoner's dilemma. But what if the other rats on you? What if you both rat on each other? What if you both stay silent? So if you both stay silent, you both only serve 2 years. If one of you rats on the other, um, he gets 1 year, the other one gets 5 years, vice versa. And if you both rat on each other, you both get 3 years. There's variations, but that's just the idea. It's like essentially, do you cooperate or do you defect or betray each other? So each algorithm and each turn chooses to make a decision. You cooperate or you backstab, essentially. Yeah. So there were algorithms that only ever attacked. There were algorithms that only ever cooperated. There was the ones that always forgave. Yeah. So every kind of conceivable kind of strategy. So the question is, what was the best? The winning strategy was like 2 lines of code, tit for tat. Basically, you start generous, so you cooperate first, and then the next line is whatever the other person does, you do as well. So if you start generous and that person betrays you, you betray them in the next round. Okay, so this is like old world justice, eye for an eye. So collaborate first, return what was given in the previous term. So this is old world justice, eye for an eye. But was that the best strategy? It turns out that once we honed in on tit for tat and we kept elaborating, we found there was a variation that was better. So why it works? It rewards cooperation, it punishes exploitation, and it forgives quickly. So it builds trust, avoids conflicts. But the problem is that this was just it was a head-to-head competition between two actors, and that's not necessarily reflects the real world. So, without the complexity, chaos, mess, disorder, or noise of the real world. So, the problem of noise. In real life, mistakes happen, communication errors. Pure tit for tat can lead to endless cycles of retaliation, to blood feuds. So, it's not ideal for the complexity of the real world. Leads to things like this. This is the Hatfield clan. They're very famous. They're known as the Hatfield and the McCoys. If you've ever heard that story, it's two families that got stuck into a blood feud that lasted generations. Them killing one, the other one's taking revenge, back and forth. There's songs about it, but there's many examples all over the world of blood feuds and people getting sucked into this retaliation. In the Balkans, with the Montenegrin and Albanian, some of those blood feuds lasted 200 years. So endless cycles of retaliation. Tit for tat. This is an elaboration, a modified form of tit for tat, stronger than its derivative. So basically, every few defections, you forgive the other person. Okay, and so it's justice tempered with mercy, and it quiets some of the negative reverberations in the system. Cooperation flourishes when strategies combine firmness with forgiveness, justice tempered with mercy.
So every once in a while, a person will randomly, as opposed to titting for tatting, he will
Forgive the other one.
forgive you
Yeah.
randomly.
So you do, if somebody strikes you, you strike them back, but then every once in a while you just forgive them because maybe there was a communication error, whatever. There's anyhow, but so like having, yeah, yes, but it's not, if you go too far and you forgive too much, that leads to society crumbling as well, which is, we're going to get there. Tempered, but not supplanted. Okay. Oop, as forgiveness is one of the attributes of the merciful one, so also is justice one of the attributes of the Lord. The tent of existence is upheld upon the pillar of justice and not upon forgiveness. The continuance of mankind depends upon justice and not upon forgiveness. So if at present the law of pardon were practiced in all countries, in short time the world would be disordered and the foundations of human life would crumble. To recapitulate, the constitution of the communities depends upon justice, not upon forgiveness. Abdul Baha. Again, that loving man in that picture up in the corner. So Abdul Baha spent a long time in prison, and when he was in prison, this um, American woman journalist visited him and had a series of conversations that eventually got turned into a book called Some Answered Questions. And one of the questions she asked him was this: should a criminal be punished should he be forgiven and his crime overlooked? So, there are two kinds of retributive actions. One is revenge and retaliation, and the other punishment and requital. An individual has no right to seek revenge, but the body politic, as in society, has the right to punish the criminal. Such punishment is intended to dissuade and deter others from committing similar crimes. It is for the protection of the rights of man and does not constitute revenge, for revenge is that inner gratification that results from returning like for like. This is not permissible, for no one has been given the right to seek revenge. And yet, if criminals were entirely left to their own devices, the order of the world would be disrupted. So, while punishment is one of the essential requirements of the body politic, the wronged and aggrieved party has no right to seek revenge. On the contrary, he should show forgiveness and magnanimity for that which befits the human world. The body politic, however, must punish the oppressor, the murderer, and the assailant to dissuade and deter others from committing similar crimes. But that which is essential is to educate the masses that no crimes will be committed in the first place. For a people can be so educated as to shrink entirely from any crime, and indeed regard the crime itself as the greatest chastisement and the most grievous torment and punishment. Thus, no crimes would occur in the first place, such that punishments would be required. So this kind of to loop back to Plato. Um, Plato is bringing a series of lessons to people, and in discussing the Boeotian soldier and him reflecting upon his what is best for him and putting it above what is best for society, um, can could led to the downfall of their civilization. So when someone like Socrates is properly educated and has a concept of honor and courage and love for society and justice, they are able to rise and make decisions that might seem irrational for the individual, but are rational in the context of civilization as a whole. So Abdu'l-Baha is pointing out that, like, as human civilization, um, again, we can be educated and led down a path that decreases crime and violence. And you guys missed it, but I began with a bunch of slides showing the death rate amongst pre-civilization societies, which were as high as 60% in some instances, and now it's like 0.3. Thus, when Christ said, "Whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the left one also," the purpose was to educate the people, not to imply that one should assist a wolf that has fallen upon a flock of sheep and is intent upon devouring them. No, if Christ had known that a wolf had entered the fold and was about to destroy the sheep, he most certainly would have prevented it. Just as forgiveness is one of the attributes of God's mercy, so is justice one of his attributes of his lordship. The canopy of existence rests upon the pole of justice and not of forgiveness. And the life of mankind depends on justice and not forgiveness. Thus, if a decree of amnesty were to be enacted henceforth in all countries, the whole world would soon be thrown into disarray and the foundations of human life would be shattered. Likewise, if the powers of Europe had not resisted the notorious Attila, he would not have left a single soul alive. In sum, the proper functioning of the body politic of civilization depends upon justice and not forgiveness. So, what Christ meant by forgiveness and magnanimity is not that if another nation were to assail you, to burn your homes, plunder your possessions, assault your wives, children, and kin, and violate your honor, you must submit to that tyrannical host and permit them to carry out every manner of iniquity and oppression. Rather, the words of Christ refer to private transactions between two individuals, stating that if one person assaults another, the injured party should forgive, but the body politic must safeguard the rights of man. Thus, if someone were to attack, injure, oppress, and wound me, I would in no wise oppose him, but would show forgiveness. But if someone were to attack Saeed Manshadi here, it's like a friend of his, I would of course prevent him. Although to the assailant non-interference would appear as kindness, it would be sheer oppression towards Manshadi. Or to put it differently, mercy to the guilty is cruelty to the innocent, as I believe Adam Smith once said. So experience has shown that crime is less prevalent amongst civilized peoples, that is, among those who have acquired true civilization. And true civilization is divine civilization, the civilization of those who combine material and spiritual perfections. As ignorance is the root of crime, the more knowledge and learning advance, the less crime will be committed. Consider the lawless tribes of Africa, how often they kill one another and even consume each other's flesh and blood. Why do such savageries not take place in Switzerland? The reason clearly is education and virtue. Therefore, the body politic must seek to prevent crimes from being committed in the first place, rather than devise harsh punishments and penalties. Justice tempered by mercy, the way of Baha'u'llah, the greatest survival strategy known to man. So yes, true civilization is born when material progress is joined with spiritual education. Ignorance is the root of all crime and prejudice. Education and virtue uproot it. Where divine education prevails, people walk the path of justice, tempered with mercy, and can treat one another generously, greeting one another with open arms and swords sheathed in peace. Yet the sword of the body politic must ever remain ready to be drawn in defense of justice, the best beloved of God. Forgiveness is noble for the individual, but the body politic must uphold justice, as justice is essential to civilization. Without justice, mercy degenerates into lawlessness and decay. The best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. It's my favorite quote for Baha'u'llah. So it's the uncomfortable truth or uncomfortable question: how do we deal with those who do not cooperate, those who do not follow the path of generosity, of justice tempered with mercy? And forgiveness is not the proper way that a society should deal with people, because the rule of law is more important than the freedom of a person who would undermine the rule of law. So anyhow, that was my